Okay, Nyge, you know what time it is?
Is it peanut butter jelly time? Peanut butter jelly time? Peanut butter jelly with a baseball bat. Alright.
Okay, with the baseball bat, you did not hit the question out of the ballpark. Because I was going to say it's reflection time.
Ooh, just as fun.
Yeah! No, really, I want to know how you doing these days, like how you're really doing physically, spiritually, mentally, wherever you want to take it.
Ooh, I feel like I'm in a really good place mentally, physically, and emotionally.
Welcome to the Bite Your Tongue podcast. I'm Denise, and I'm joined by my good friend, Dr. Ellen Broughton. We've been through many years of parenting together, and now we're ready to talk about the ins and outs of parenting adult children. Your diapering days are over. Now it's time to consider when to bite your tongue. So let's get started. Today is a really exciting episode for us. A few episodes earlier, we interviewed two young adults, Sarah and Dan, to get the inside scoop into the lives of the young adults. Today, we're really going wild. We have with us two young adults, Nygel Turner and Merk, Nguyen, both in their mid-20s, and until 1 week ago, they were the hosts of the wildly popular podcast called Adultish. On the last episode, Merk let listeners know that she's stepping away from the podcast and focusing on her voice acting career. So good luck to you, Merk, and Nyge, we know you're going to rock it. But I want to just say this podcast has really become the voice of the young adult. It's produced by Radiotopia. With Merk and Nyge, we are finally bringing some diversity to Bite Your Tongue. Nyge is an African American, and I found some research that he always wanted to be Eddie Murphy. Merk is Vietnamese. In fact, her parents immigrated to the U.S. from Vietnam soon after 1975. How lucky are we, Ellen?
We are very lucky, and I am very excited. So Adultish is like a peek inside the brain of a young adult, and these two are the drivers, and they have so much to show us. I'm hoping they're going to share with us everything we want to know, and probably some things we don't want to know, and many things that we don't know. And some of the topics they discuss in the show are exactly the kinds of topics we need to know about, at least from the young adult frame of mind, from hip hop to politics, jobs, work ethic, parent relationships, everything in between. So welcome, Merk and Nyge. Can you tell us something about yourselves before we dive into our questions, of which we have many?
I'm going to have my bro host answer this one first.
Something told me you were going to do that. I don't know. It depends. What do y'all want to know?
Well, tell us how you got started in all this and give us a little bit of your background. I know you guys entered a competition. It sounded like where they literally auditioned many people to take the host position in this podcast.
Right.
And you two were the winners. But what brought you to that, and a little bit about your backgrounds?
So I was on a podcast with some of my friends in high school. So like my junior and senior year of high school, ended up getting like a decent amount of like traction. There was like this studio. So I grew up in Richmond, California. There's this like a studio where all the kind of like local like rappers would kind of go to, and then like after they would finish like doing that, like the engineer would let us come in and be like, all right, you guys can do your little podcast radio thing or whatever if y'all want. And so we just started a podcast, and this was at a time that like not a lot of people were podcasting, especially like entertainment podcasts, and ended up doing pretty well. We won an award in our second year, and then we ended up selling that podcast to Amazon. And then after that,
that's pretty impressive as a high schooler. What was the podcast called?
It was called Not Your Father's Podcast.
Okay.
And so
we probably should have listened to some of
Yeah,
those
should have
episodes.
listened to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Not Your Father's Podcast. And then at that time, that was a time where Amazon was buying a lot of content and just like killing it because they wanted to like kind of be on top of the podcast game. And so the show got finitoed, and then it was just us. And then I kind of was like, maybe I'm done with podcasting. But then I was in biology class in college, and somebody who was a radio host in Jamaica, he had moved out here and he was going to the same college as me. And he was like, yo, like, I'm familiar with your show. I used to love it. I went out for this job with YR Media, and they're creating a podcast for like young adults. They're doing like a talent search right now. They haven't called me back, and I think it's because they're looking for somebody like you. And so then I went out for it. Shout outs to Aldane. He set me up, and then I went out for it. It was like 2-3 months of auditioning, and then got it.
Wow. Well, they picked two great people. You have such chemistry. Had such chemistry, I guess I should say. Anyway,
I think we still have good chemistry.
No,
okay.
definitely do. Yeah. And
all right, Merk, give us a little bit about you.
So I come from the public radio background. I guess let's take it back to 2014 when I graduated high school. I was involved in my news production class and I was a student body president. Still, that's when I peaked. But after that, I went to school for journalism and media production. And I did this program called RadioActive Youth Media that's based out of KUOW in Seattle, which is our local NPR station, one of them. And that workshop taught me how to tell stories for audio. And so I kind of fell in love with storytelling. I always was, but I didn't know you could have a journalism degree and be able to do work and tell stories for a living. And so I told the story of my dad's escape from Vietnam. And I always say that his life story started my life as a storyteller. So fast forward a bit, freelancing for NPR and some other public radio shows, announcing on the side. And then I felt like, I feel like the demographic that we're serving is very not me. It's much older. It's very white. It's very male. And I just felt like I couldn't totally be myself. And so I looked into podcasting, and then some friends from RadioActive, they said, hey, YR Media, because they're the ones who actually produce Adultish, or me as a former employee of YR Media, they were looking for, as Nyge was saying, hosts. And so I think they told us that I was one of the first people to audition, and then Nyge was one of the last people to audition.
Oh my
but
God.
it worked out. It was like they really liked the bread of the sandwich and decided, okay, we're going to have these two breadwinners just make the meat of this show. And so they gave us basically full creative agency to come up with content. And we didn't even have a title when we started out. It was our coworker, Nancy, who came up with Adult-ish specifically. But it was really unique because at the time that we joined the show, were we 21 at that time?
Yeah. I think I had just turned 22.
Yeah, Nyge is a few months older than me.
Yeah.
You're such an old man, Nyge.
I can tell. Visually, he looks much older.
But yeah, so that's how I got into podcasting, and I was born and raised in actually Linwood, Washington, 20 miles north of Seattle, and I lived in lots of places. Nyge is the local host to YR Media, whose headquarters is in downtown Oakland, and throughout the show's production, I've lived in New York. I lived in the Bay Area for a bit with not with Nyge, but there was a 3-month period time when we were together, and then most recently I was living in North Hollywood, but now I'm in Seattle again.
Well, welcome home.
Thank you.
Right? So let's get into some questions. Why don't you start off, Ellen?
I think that let's talk about that content that you were talking about, the meat in between those slices of bread. We want to know the issues. That is the issues, those key issues you've addressed on your show that really resonated with your audience that we in our demographic need to understand, and some topics we might not even know exist.
Mm-hmm.
We might be completely blind to some of the issues that are so important to people your age.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of them?
I think one of them was sexuality was one. There was an episode where I came out as queer, and that was in our past season. And I think the show in general, we like to talk about things that were taboo and just trying to reframe the narrative of what adulting is. So that's one. And I think a big one we talk about is also mental health. For sure.
Yeah. We're going to have an episode on mental health coming up. What do you hope? I guess I'm going to ask this straight out. One of the episodes I listened to was when you interviewed the person who fired Nyge on his first job. Okay. And I feel a little bit lost in what the whole work atmosphere and work ethic is for the young adult today. And I think, especially with COVID now, it's even become more sort of remote. And all I see is young adults vacationing here, vacationing there, going here, going there. And yet they're all telling me they're still working. And I was raised to be the first one into the office, be the last one home, work the hardest. What is the trend in work ethic with young adults today? And what do we as parents of young adults need to understand and know?
Ooh, I mean, I don't know if it's like necessarily a trend. I can say for myself, with like, yeah, definitely. I think the thing really is people are trying to prioritize their mental health over anything.
Totally.
Because they realize just like, I mean, when you just bury yourself in work and go tunnel vision for your career, sometimes it can just leave you in a place where you feel more fulfilled, I guess, with your like accomplishments than your actual day-to-day life. And I think honestly it's from advice that we got from our like elder generations, where people are like, yo, I feel super fulfilled in my career and I have all these accomplishments, but like when I go home, I don't even know these people here. So I think we really just leaned into that and we're like, okay, where can we zig where they zagged? And then we got to make sure that we're, you know, providing time for us to go on vacations, for us to spend time with family, for us to do all these things that put our like social lives in that same front seat along with our career.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sound like an old person here because as a man, because I am actually, I am. And also because as a manager and a parent, I'm going to ask you two questions. I'm going to just say one thing is as a manager, and a mentor too, I would tell this is how I would mentor people, like prioritize. And then as a manager, it's sort of like, well, wait a minute. When I say take all the time you need, I don't really mean take all the time you need. And it's hard to find that middle ground because it's just difficult. And then also as a parent of one of those kids, now young adults, who would sort of prioritize his, would say, oh, Mom, you don't need to worry about that. I can take an extra day off. My boss isn't going to care. And I know his boss probably cares. How would you advise us as parents to counsel our kids and even as mentors of the next generation to, I can't say take a step back from what we've been saying, but to make it more, I don't know, appropriate, meaningful?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
I sometimes feel like I pressure my kids too much. Are you working hard enough? You know, because my dad was an entrepreneur and he worked and worked and worked.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes with it. It makes sense from what you're saying. I think no matter what generation you are, you want sustainability. I think for our parents' generation, it was more sustainability meant financial stability. Being able to get a house, kids, car, all those things. And I think for our generation, because our parents have worked for that and we have those things already, now when we think of sustainability, it's okay, my mental health, my well-being. I think because we think of it like that, for us, it's not like, oh my gosh, you're going to ask a day off for that, because it's just kind of ingrained in our culture now. And I think it's changing. And so I think if you're a parent or a manager, just kind of reframing of, okay, how is this worker going to have the most sustainable future here with me in their life? And that's them being able to take care of themselves. And like, obviously you want to be sure that, well, I guess if you're the person on the other side, the young person taking off that mental health day, I really hope it's for a mental health day. You're not like, oh, I'm trying to get tickets to Coachella and I need a whatever.
Oh, I can tell you, in my family, it's Coachella. It's not like I'm going to sit around and meditate and yeah.
But wait, Coachella might be you prioritizing your mental health.
Yeah.
You might need,
That is true.
You might need that space to just let out, and then you can come back into like the work environment and be productive. I think.
Let me ask you about this mental health. And I do know that it's very big. And I have a lot of friends who have young adults struggling with lots of different things. Why is it was it always there? Or is there so much more?
Ooh.
Has there been so much more pressure on? I mean, I was reading something in the New York Times, I think yesterday, or maybe it was Time Magazine, on how to find happiness. And some parents say they think their kid's happy if they're getting into the best college. I mean, is there just too much pressure on kids today and it's rocking their mental health?
Oh my gosh.
Or what's the story here?
I think it's always been around. Like
Yeah.
me and my dad actually were recently having this conversation because he got like my Kaiser medical bill and he saw like some mental health medication that I was on. And he was like, "Yo, what's that?" Ooh, voice crack. He was like, "Yo, what's that?" And so
Whoa,
he was like-
puberty.
I just basically was like running it down to him, right? I was basically just like running it down to him, and he was really interested because he was like, "Yo, like I don't know if anybody in my generation was really even taking medication for like their mental health or even were able to get these things diagnosed and stuff like that." But he was like, in my generation, like when something was going on with you, people would just gossip about you and keep it pushing. And then nobody would see that person for a little amount of time. And then maybe they would get it together or they wouldn't. And then they would like come back on the scene or not. But I think now it's just like people are trying to highlight these stories so much more. So it's not like a taboo subject. And when somebody has a mental health emergency, they aren't put with these nasty labels on their name and on their character that they have to like live with for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, it's normal. We all go through something like this. And it's important to really address it, or else it can linger on for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and another thing is now I think we have the language for something that's always been around. Take Marilyn Monroe, for example. She was someone who struggled with mental health. And I actually, in our Mental Meds and Ish episode, where we're talking all about mental health and medication, because Nyge and our producer, Georgia, they've been on it longer than I have. I've only recently started my journey with medication because I grew up with the narrative of, oh, you're going to get addicted. This is bad. But also, like, I don't blame my parents for that because, I mean, they're immigrants to the U.S. When they were young and struggling with probably anxiety and death of parents at a young age, living in the Vietnam War with bombs just exploding around them, of course, you're going to focus on your physical survival versus your mental survival, first and foremost. And so I think now that, intergenerational war trauma is totally real. But going back to Marilyn Monroe, I mean, she's someone who struggled, but there, psychology and social science wasn't where it is today. Who's to say that if she had the help, that the access to resources that we have today, would she still be here? We don't know. And this is something I've talked to one of my therapists about, who, funny enough, she was an older white woman, also in her 60s. So y'all would probably get along real well. But I mean, even her, when I was telling her when I first started wanting to use medication, she was saying, well, when I was because she was on it herself, she said that they were prescribing her like 3 Xanaxes a day, which nowadays you're like, whoa, but it's because, again, science wasn't where it is today. So
right.
Hello, everyone.
Right. We didn't have the medication tools that we have now in the toolbox, and also even the therapy tools. There was really one size fits all for therapy, and it was very different 30 years ago.
Well, and I've had my own mental health journey. And I guess what I worry about with my adult children, and I'd like to know what you guys, how you approach something like that, I guess, with your adult children, is I don't think there are great resources available to everyone. And I think it's very hard to find a therapist or a counselor that really meets your needs. I mean, sometimes they're jumping to medication too soon without going through talk therapy. Mm-hmm. And, I just worry. And I'm a worrying parent, so that's a bad thing to begin with, but I am a worrying parent. I think every young adult, every person, therapy is a great gift and a wonderful thing everyone should explore because you learn so much about yourself. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we have such a weakness in strong mental health care in our country.
Yeah.
Very true. Merk and I have had this conversation multiple times where I remember like when Merk was first getting into like therapy, you were talking to me about it and you were just like, oh, like I made this decision to go to therapy and stuff like that. And I remember congratulating you, but at the same time I was like, well, this isn't like the finish line, like, yeah, the first step is being like, yo, I do need help or anything like that. But once you actually start looking for a therapist and start having these experiences, it's like you entered a whole new journey of your life where it's like, oh my goodness, like we don't click, you just agree with everything that I say. You don't have, every time I'm like describing things to you, you're just like, yeah, so yeah, gotta be tough. And it's
Well,
like,
that's what I mean. That was the model for therapy when I started as a psychologist.
yeah.
It totally was just sort of like, yeah.
So how do you approach this as parents, with adult children? Do we wait for them to come to us? Do we bring up that, gee, it would be a great idea for everyone to sort of get therapy and discover more about themselves? Or, sometimes kids are afraid to share that with their parents because they don't want their parents to worry.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
everybody needs it. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, right. I would co-sign that. However, I think if you are a parent talking to your adult child, you got to meet them where they're at. If there's anyone who's struggling, one of the worst things I think is making them feel as if they don't have control over their life. So I think it starts with a lot of questions, asking, "Hey, how are you doing today?" and pointing out factual things. "Hey, I've noticed that you don't do this as much anymore. What can I ask? Like, what's going on? How are you feeling?" Asking open-ended questions, I think in general is just the way to go, because yes or no doesn't leave a lot of room for conversations, especially if you've got someone who doesn't really talk very much, like my fiance. But if they are at a place where they are seeking help and they just don't know where to go, then asking them, "Would you like me to help you?" Because if you just go in and help, as parents tend to like to do, I mean, that's what people who love each other like to do. You just don't want to see whoever you love in pain or turmoil. I think it's all about putting them in the driver's seat and letting them make that decision. Because if no matter how many resources you provide, if someone is refusing the help or thinks they don't need it, that's wasting your time and energy. And I think sometimes, this sounds pretty harsh, but I think sometimes that person has to experience rock bottom because they have to learn it themselves that they need help.
So let me pose a question, getting back to that work ethic and where this intersects with mental health. So let's say you have a child, I'm not saying personally, but maybe, who doesn't always show up on time for work, or who feels like, oh, don't worry, I can take off early on Friday because nobody cares. And for a parent, many times what we're most worried about isn't the work ethic or doing the right thing. It's that if you lose that job, the tenuous grip you have on your mental health is going to go completely down the toilet. How do you address that? How would, as a young adult, what would be the best way for a parent to approach something like that, where the really underlying issue is the mental health, but the surface issue is showing up for work on time and not losing your job?
Facts. I think that's totally different though. I think we've kind of been more speaking to like people taking like time off for like their mental health because they just need to do that to even be more productive in the work environment. But like showing up late for work and giving like a half effort and stuff like that, like I think that no matter what generation like you're in, that's something that needs to be like, I don't know, if you're working somewhere, if they're paying you for your expertise in like in a particular angle, I think it's just like it's being a good person, like respecting people's time, pulling up, doing the job that they asked you to do to the best of your ability, and going home. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's just what I want to say.
Yeah, actually, so I think if your question is more along the lines of, you as a parent are concerned of your kid taking what seems like excessive time off that jeopardizes their job.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, take me, for example. I actually left this job that had benefits because it was our full-time job. It is Nyge's full-time job right now. I left a job that gave me financial security, that was a place where I had coworkers who were fully supportive of me, that seemingly gave me everything to where I wouldn't have any mental health problems. And yet I had mental health problems because analyzing yourself for the sake of the show, but also just, I don't know, the work is really hard. I think people underestimate how much work goes into a podcast, especially the way
I agree.
Yeah, especially the way that we have created the podcast. And so I think something that my mom told me, which is really helpful for me to reframe this leaving the job, was, you might not be making as much money as you are this year or until you get your next job. And that's okay because, life is like seasons, they change. And she gave me some hope saying maybe in the future you're going to have a job that has more, or you're going to be making the same kind of money you were before. But thankfully I have my parents to financially support me if I do need that. But I think what was more important to me there was that emotional support she gave me of, again, going back to agency, giving me that choice and that support of whichever route you go. She saw it as a long-term investment for my health, for me to leave the job. And her and my dad, and so I did.
That makes sense. And
Yeah.
sometimes I don't do that. I want to ask something because I think this really hits into mental health too. Social media, what role it plays in our mental health. I mean, you did an episode where I think Merk was trying to do a detox. I feel like I need a detox. I'm sort of, I see that
Me too.
it's so harmful. It's horrible. And it causes me to be depressed. Why do I keep doing it?
I mean, Nyge also was in that detox, and I think that you struggled with the experiment more than I did, Nyge.
It was good though. I fooled with the detox. I've tried to even apply that to my day-to-day life too. Like, just, I don't know. Social media is just such a like rat race type of thing where you just see everything that everybody else is doing, especially as like a young person. Like, you're seeing, oh, so-and-so just went back to graduate school. Oh, so-and-so got their PhD. Oh, so-and-so's a doctor now. So-and-so got 5 kids now. Like, and you're just like, oh man, like what am I going on? Like, what am I doing? What's going on in my life? But I don't know, taking that break, you kind of realize more like, no, I'm going at my own pace. I don't need to be worried about what anybody else is doing. And yeah, it's life is an experience. Just,
do you think your generation is looking at social media better now? I mean, are you guys?
I don't think so.
I mean, I just got exposed to TikTok, and it's like,
Oh no, not TikTok!
Really bad tunnel of hell. And on TikTok, everyone's working 2 hours a week and making $4,000 a month, and I'm thinking, what did I do with my life?
Yeah.
So how is your generation going to handle this as time goes on? What are you guys thinking? What's in your heads?
Well, I am personally not on TikTok, nor is Nyge. Are you on TikTok?
No.
Okay, now wait a second. I watch TikTok. I've never done a TikTok. Well, I'm a voyeur.
Yeah, but I still don't. I have a TikTok account, but I haven't used it. Like, I don't even open up the app. People just send things to me, and I'll watch them. So I'm not on TikTok because I know if I were to be on it, just even watching, I would lose hours of my life. And I think that social media, it's kind of like a love-hate thing, You can see it as a tool, and I think that especially during pandemic times, that's how a lot of us were able to connect with each other. And because we grew up, as screenagers pretty much,
Right.
it was a way to be in touch with people and to be in the know. But with that comes that comparison culture. And I think that's where social media is kind of a tumultuous place. Because if you're developing your mind and your identity, no matter what age you are, you look at someone else and they have this and you don't, you go, yeah, what am I doing with my life kind of thing? And it can be funny, but then, then it can also take a serious toll on your mental health. And I think for that episode, that's kind of the question we were playing with, the question that you asked us. And I think that's going to be a question we're going to have to, ask us every year because the answer might change.
I think it always comes up too, like, because whenever you're looking at how much money people are making on social media and stuff like that, or even YouTube and stuff, you're wondering, like, is that really, like, sustainable? Like, years from now, are you still going to be able to be making that same amount of money doing that when the next fire app pops up or anything like that? And I think it's hard to say, because I don't know. I think there's no right way to adult. And so, similar to how a lot of people, I remember, like, in my family, like in older generations, a lot of like my family members were factory workers. And as technology advanced, a lot of them lost their jobs and were kind of like left like, yo, I've been working this job and this is how I've been getting money and providing for my family for this amount of years, but now it's not sustainable. And I think similarly, like, people are on social media, like, how sustainable is that? And how sustainable is that going to be? And I don't know. Hopefully they can do it forever. But I mean, if they can't, they'll probably face a similar challenge where it's like, man, now what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Very true.
It's very true. Well, I want to shift a little bit because I want to talk about your momish episode, because both of you seem to have great relationships with your mom. And there's not a lot I hear about your father, so you can fill us in on that too. But as young adults, what makes the relationship with your mother's work?
Mm.
And how is your mom doing, Nyge?
I mean, she's all right. Like, my mom, we had. I mean, it's hard to say that we had a really good relationship because, we still have a really good relationship. She's just no longer able to really like talk or anything like that. Like her dementia has gotten to a point where she's no longer able to like speak or anything. But my mom was and always will be like my best friend, and always has been my best friend, like since I was a little
And
kid.
why? What made that work? What was it your mom did, or I guess can't do now? And I don't mean to say that in a
No. I totally understand what you're saying.
That you felt like you could really trust her and share with her, and felt like she was your best friend.
She always felt like a teammate, but like a like an older teammate to me. And so whenever I had anything like any wild idea, I'd be like, Mom, I'm about to leave the house. I'm about to do this or whatever. I'm want to follow my dream in this area or whatever. She'd be like, all right, okay, if that's your plan, we gonna like let's lay it out. So you're gonna do this for how long? You're gonna live where? This is gonna cost this amount. Yada yada yada. And she would like run through the whole play with me, and then I would end up being like, yeah, that make no sense. All right, never mind. And so like then it was her way of just like she just spelled it out for me, and she would let me come to it on my own, and then I always really appreciated that. Whereas like my dad is more just like break it out my face. But me and my dad have a really good relationship also, because I do appreciate that as well. Sometimes I just be on some wild stuff, and sometimes I just need to be told get out my face, and that's why I go to my dad for that, and then I would go to my mom to get the more like loving end of the advice.
I love that though, because it's something I don't think I do enough with my own kids, is just sort of lay it all out for them, not judge, but just sort of say, okay, well, so it sounds like you're going to do this, and then this is going to happen because of this, or this is let them figure it out on their own. It's the hardest thing to do as a parent. Your mother was,
a saint.
Yeah. like that takes a lot of restraint and wisdom.
Well, I think
and love.
So much of it depends on the kid, and that goes to you, Merk, because you talked a little bit about how you and your mom are so close. I think you played therapist with your sister, right?
Oh, yeah.
You were trying to get them closer.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your mom, I guess? And tell us what you think she did that was great, that brought you so close, and how did the therapy work out with your sister?
Okay, so my mom's name is Kimchi, and she's a spicy woman. She really is. But I mean, I think what worked with her is that she let me into her life. She let me know who she was. And of course, when I was younger, she was always in that mom role, and I was the youngest of three, so I was always in baby role. And I think what kind of helped between her and my dad, because they're both the youngest child in their family, youngest of their sex, and so am I. And so I think when I got older, she just trusted me a lot more and let me into not who she was on the daily, I like this, I like lavender, I don't like when your dad does this. I also got to see the cracks and how broken she was. She lost her mom when she was 12 in Vietnam and never really had that relationship. Again, as the youngest daughter, she didn't get all the beautiful Vietnamese dresses my grandmother would sew for my aunts because she had passed away. And my dad's mom also passed away when he, later on in life, but he left her to escape from Vietnam at a young age. So I think not only did she let me in, but she allowed me to be curious. I'm a very curious child, hence the work that we've done. But I vocalized what it is I wanted, and I wanted to have not just my mom in my life, but my mom as a person who also happens to be my friend. And I think she took me seriously on that. And so, when I asked questions, hey, what about this? She would tell me. And of course, there was a lot of, oh, you're too young to know this and blah, blah, blah. And it still happens to this day, even though I'm 24. So it goes back and forth. But I think I also have to understand that she's an adult parent learning how to have an adult child. And as you both are,
And it's hard.
Yeah. And with my sister, the relationship there, and it's so interesting that you ask this question now because my sister recently gave birth. And she's 6 years older than I am. She's in her early 30s. And my mom has spent the past month with my sister in Virginia because my sister's husband's in the Navy. And so they're over there. My mom comes home tomorrow. It's the first time I see her in about a month, basically since I moved back from LA to Seattle. And their relationship has gotten significantly better. And I think by confronting them as to why they weren't confronting each other with these wants that they had, these wants to be close to each other for the sake of protecting that other person. Oh, if I ask how she's doing and she's sad, that's going to make me sad. I was kind of like, cut the bullshit. Say how you really feel. And I think living in New York helped me be direct. But
I lived in New York for a while too.
Yeah.
And it was a hard transition to Denver because people thought, oh my gosh.
Oh
she's
gosh.
So
Yeah, it's so weird. But
so
yeah, they're doing well now. And I think, it just kind of, they kind of broke out of the you're not just my mom role, you are a person who's lived through this thing too. My mom has been a huge help to my sister, and my sister also lets her in because for a long time my sister didn't want to let my mom in, vice versa.
Right. That makes sense. How about your ethnic backgrounds? Both of you are from minority families. Do you think there's a difference in parenting adult children in different cultures? And how might we learn from each of yours if there is?
Ooh, 100%.
I think, yeah, definitely, for sure.
So let us in.
Do you want to go, Merk? Or?
Sure, yeah. So, I'm Vietnamese American, and in my Vietnamese household, it wasn't a thing to be very physically affectionate nor very expressive with how you truly felt with your children or as a kid to your parent because, filial piety is a huge thing. You kind of save face for the sake of your family, even if you're actually hurt. Think about the greater good, not just yourself. You don't want to be quote unquote selfish, which kind of conflicts with the American narrative, which is very, it's more individualistic. It's more you need to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people. And that was something that was hard to grapple with, having that dichotomy of these two worlds. And so I think what's odd is that if you were to ask the same question to my siblings, they'd probably give you a different answer because I think it's not just our culture and who we are, but also birth order. And I think by the time my parents got around to me as the third born and the youngest, they saw what kind of didn't work out so well with the older siblings. And, I think a lot of what my parents didn't give growing up was that verbal affirmation. Hey, you did a good job. They weren't the ones initiating hugs necessarily if we weren't crawling around, But I think because I saw my siblings not have that, that's something that I wanted. And I think that's why I have a really good relationship with my parents. Yeah.
Are you a hugger now today?
Oh, I've always been a hugger, but the question is my family a hugger family now? I like to think yes. You're welcome.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Nyge.
I feel like I think it's a lot different when it comes to like what culture you come from too, because it's a lot that you kind of like won't learn about your culture depending on what your background is. I think like as far as African American culture, they talk about some things in school, but it's a lot that they leave out. And I think in parenting, it's kind of up to you as a parent to like fill in the rest of the story. And how you choose to do that is it's a toss up, and it's going to in fact impact their life a ton. Something that we did an episode on. I did an episode on a plantation tour that my dad took me on growing up, and it was really interesting. We did like a lot of research into our family, and unfortunately, as with most African Americans, like it ends in slavery because it's hard to trace beyond that point. And so we went to Louisiana, where my family is from, and we went on a plantation tour. And basically, like, my dad was just educating me on, you know, where we come from, because I feel like as an African American, you kind of don't really get a lot of where you come from. You get like ties back to 100 or something like that years ago, but like beyond that, as far as your culture, is kind of like, I don't know, like wherever you want it to be, I guess. And so going back to like a plantation and kind of seeing where like my ancestors and stuff like were from when they first got to this country, it was a pretty surreal experience. And yeah, I think that's a lot more where I talked about my dad's style of teaching, where my mom is more like the kind of hustler and my dad is definitely the storyteller and the dreamer. And yeah, that whole experience. I can't tell the whole story now, but like,
no, this is.
We can put in our episode notes a link to that episode.
Yeah.
How about that? And
yeah,
the story.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how will this inform your own parenting? Do you ever think about that? In terms of your mom's style and your
Definitely.
dad's style?
You know what's funny is, like, you know, when you grow up, like, I don't know, when you grow up, you just find yourself saying more and more things that your parents like said and did.
Yeah.
Oh no, I
then-
become them.
Oh, I know, it's so annoying.
Just
Every
wait
time
until
that
you're-
happens, I get so irritated.
Just
It
wait
gets
until
worse.
you're our age and you look in the mirror and you see them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my goodness.
I already look a ton like my mom. Like, everybody's always said that I was my mom's twin my whole life.
Yeah, I get
And
the
so-
dad one. They're like, you look just like your dad. I know,
Yeah.
but I shave my mustache.
Anyway, answer that question for Ellen. I sort of interrupted on how you look at how this impacts your own, what you think of parenting in your future.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to assume you're going to be a parent, but it's sort of
Yeah,
like, you know,
right.
like parenting in the bigger sense too. We all sort of, you know, mentor and parent as we get older.
I want to be a parent eventually. I need some time.
Just recently got married.
Yeah, I got married 4 months ago?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks. But yeah, I think it'll definitely like inform my teaching, because I know what worked for me. And so I would want to like say certain things and do certain things that really worked for me and made a big impact on my life. But I think the thing that you have to realize is, just because something worked for you, or just because something was like an effective teaching method with you, it won't be like that necessarily for your kid or whoever you're trying to mentor. I grew up around, like, my kind of like friend circle is pretty tight. Like, all my parents' best friends had kids, and those are all my best friends. And so all of us like all know each other's families and stuff like that. Anyway, a few of my friends, like younger siblings, they got married and moved away. And so I took them out for like a fishing trip a while back. And it was just interesting. Like, my whole talk that I had with them, I just sounded so much like my dad. So much so that, like, in the middle of the trip, I was just like, I don't even want to talk anymore. I don't know why I even did this. I don't want to say anything. I sound exactly.
I've become
like,
Leland.
I sound so much like Leland Turner, and I don't want to even do this anymore. But
you're the storyteller. You're the yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? How about you?
Yeah, totally. I think about parenting a lot because my sister, you know, her and I are super close, and her being a parent for the first time, and me and my brother, we talk a lot about the way we were raised and what we want, because we all definitely want kids. And I think it's just, my answer's different from Nyge's in that I will see what has worked for me, but I think I'm going to like not assume that it's going to work for my kids too. Like, obviously I'm going to verbally affirm them from day one and, you know, come on, you're a hugger. But I mean, you know, if they're not a hugger, then I'll have to accept that too. But I'm excited because I get to create this human who I hope is going to want to be my friend. But I also have to understand that they might not there were some things they're not going to vibe with me on. And that sounds, oh gosh, that sounds scary. For getting rejected by your own child, oh my. But I mean, I think if I go in leading with love and, embracing them for who they are wholeheartedly, I don't see why they wouldn't do the same for me.
I feel like the older you get, you realize like how hard it probably was for our parents to raise us.
Oh my gosh.
And the more you realize, like, man, like, why was I just such a loser sometimes to my parents? And
well, just wait till you have kids of your own. You'll appreciate them even more, I think.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm listening to you guys, 24 and 25 years old, sounds so young to me. And you have such great heads on your shoulders. You just don't sound like you're 24 and 25 years old. That's all I'm going to say.
I want to ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game.
I want to ask that one thing that I sort of alluded to before we started. This whole idea of, and I struggle with this with my own kids. I really try to be with it. I really do. I try. Why do you think I tried TikTok? I try to be open-minded and accepting and all this sort of thing. But I always put my foot in my mouth. I mean, do you find that with your parents sometimes? Like, even though they're trying so hard, they aren't with it 100%?
Yeah, totally. I mean, my so coming out was interesting for me because I told both parents individually, like, hey, I'm a queer child. Yes, Samuel's going to be my husband, but if he were to pass away early, don't be surprised if I come home with someone who's not a cis male. That was basically how I approached it. And my dad, despite telling him that, and it took him a while to like totally understand. It took like a night, thanks to my brother. But one time he was talking and he used the F word, the one that is like a pile of sticks, the F word. And he used that not toward me or anything, but I said, hey, that's not okay to say. And yes, I came in hot with how I said it, but I told him why it hurts me. And I think I tried my best not to shame him, because I think something that we also promote on our show is that shame is not an effective tool. No matter what your stance is, whatever, it's just not. You make someone feel bad about themselves, they're not going to want to tell you anything. And that's why when something like that happens, I try my best to have patience and understand, okay, what was his intention with saying that word? If there was really no meaning behind it, then I'll tell him, well, if there's no meaning, then could you please not say it? And then vice versa, there are so many times when my parents tell me something and I feel like I'm being shamed, because growing up, shame was very ingrained into my Vietnamese culture. And I think it's very ingrained into Asian culture in general. And so I think nowadays, like if I vocalize like, hey, the way you said that actually kind of hurt my feelings, like I have to trust that my parents are going to take me seriously on that and change up how they said it or whatever. And I mean, that goes both ways.
Yeah. And I think sometimes as a parent, you want to be educated. Like you didn't, like I would completely know that wasn't an appropriate word to use like 30 years ago. However, maybe some parents don't. And maybe, we do want to, most of us want to do the right thing. And we need your help in figuring out what that actually is.
Different communities too, different things are like acceptable.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So we're close to the end of our episode, and what we like to do at the end, I know we can talk forever.
I love this.
Ellen does this, and then you do what she's going to ask. I want you guys to do just a little bit of back and forth on how you do on adultish for me, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead, Ellen, ask this first.
Okay, let me ask you. Okay, so what we like to do is to give our guests the opportunity to give us a couple of key points that they hope our listeners will take away from this episode. So what we'd like from you is a couple of points, things that our listeners will remember about being the parent of an adult child from the adult child's point of view. What do we need to know?
Cue the Jeopardy music while we think.
That sounds like key points. I think something that you were hitting on that last question even too, Merk, when you were talking about like how you approach like correcting your parents and stuff like that. Like, I think that's something that people should lean into more. I think ignorance is something that as a society we shy away from, but I think it promotes the most growth. so I never get upset or angry like with my parents for being, ignorant about something or not really knowing what is okay or up with the times or anything like that. Like, so I think that's where the most growth comes from, is just embrace the fact that you don't know a lot of things and then just ask the questions, because I think that's what helps us all be better people, is when you ask those hard hitting questions.
Yeah.
And then even in while you're answering it, like, you're going to be explaining more about like where you're coming from to your kid. And so I think that helps them out too, like knowing your intentions and knowing that, okay, you might have did something or said something, but is that really like what you meant or what we associated with? Because you might have said something and it's different and it's associated with different things from the way that you came up. But then what we see is like, oh no, they meant it this way. And so I think you grow a ton from just embracing that ignorance.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Okay, we need one from you now, Merk.
I think reframe the situation and do it without shame. And what I mean by that is, if you are having any kind of scenario in your life or a problem, a fork in the road, whatever, and you're having a really hard time dealing with it, whether it's just yourself, whether it's a relationship, just kind of try to reframe it. It's along the sentiment of put yourself in their shoes. How would they feel? But also in doing that, it's like you can't assume what it is that they feel. And I think what I was saying about, giving your adult child agency, but also giving as that adult child to your parent, giving them not just benefit of the doubt, but assuming good intentions. I mean, as Nyge was saying, I think it's very important to be clear with your intentions, whether you're asking a question or responding to somebody, because like, enough with the beating around the bush. Yes, say how it is you feel, but do it in a way that's not shaming the person, because that's just, as we've seen in this past year and the year before that, and arguably the few years before that, just shame is not effective. So
true.
Reframe the situation, understand the intention from both sides or multiple sides, however many people are in there, and do it without shame. Do it with love.
Yeah. I think you're really saying, both positions come from a place of love most of the time. We need to remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, before we say thank you and goodbye, could you guys do a quick promo for Adultish with your personalities? And I know, Merk, you're moving on, but you can still get it.
Yeah. Adultish is a production by Wire Media, distributed by Radiotopia. Season 6 is going to be in full swing soon. Nyge, why don't you tell them a little bit more about how listeners can get involved?
For sure. Yeah, season 6 is about to be fire. We're coming with a whole new format. The show is going to be more of an advice column. So we're getting we're getting all of our topics, not just from our brains, but we're getting them directly from the young people themselves. Mm-hmm. So we want people to write in like an old-fashioned advice column, and then we're going to make our best version of an adultish episode to address that problem.
So it's like Bite Your Tongue Junior, basically.
Facts.
Yeah, Bite Your Tongue Junior. That's exactly right.
That's what we're trying to do.
About it, and I want to encourage our listeners to tune in, because when I listen, I feel like it's truly a peek inside the minds of young adults and what you're interested in and what you're talking about, and I can get more woke, right?
That's what we need. Come to Adultish to get more woke.
There you go.
That's exactly right. So thank you guys both so much for being so responsive and joining with us. We've really enjoyed it today.
Yes, and I think this was episode 12 or 13. We're having a hard time keeping track right now. You guys were great. We loved having you on here, and I just love what you have to say. I've learned so much, and like Denise said, it's great to tune into your podcast because we learn a lot about what it is we need to pay attention to in our kids' lives.
That's exactly right.
Very cool. No, this was super fun. Y'all are amazing, and y'all are really good hosts also. So
thank you. We'll cut that out. I'm gonna, since Ellen and I are together for the first time, actually, we're in Denver. She lives in Boston and Prague sometimes, and we actually got studio space today to do 3 podcasts. So if you don't mind, usually I do my close after people leave, but would you mind if I do it real quick here?
Go for it.
All good.
Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to check our episode notes after you listen to this podcast, and you'll get a lot more on adultish, and we'll try to share some of the things that Merk and Nyge were talking about. But first, I'm going to just remind you again, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Give us a review. We love reading them. Please follow, bite your tongue on all your social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We want to keep the conversation going. Finally, I think I ask this every podcast episode, but I'm going to say it one more time. If every listener would just share one episode with a friend, it would be amazing for us. So just do it. And that's it. That's a wrap. Lots more coming up, from mental health to more on young adults and wills, trust in estates, and everything in between. Thanks again to Connie Fisher, our sound engineer. And just wait, listen to us, share, and remember, sometimes you just have to bite your tongue.